The sound of the call to prayer echoed softly through the open window as Aaliyah brushed her hair in front of the mirror. Her room, located on the top floor of their elegant villa in Jumeirah, was flooded with the warm amber light of sunset. From the outside, their home looked like something out of an architecture magazine. White marble walls, arched windows, palm trees lining the driveway. Inside, everything gleamed with wealth. But Aaliyah had long stopped being impressed by luxury. She glanced up at the old portrait hanging above her bed. It showed her parents, Saad and Mariam al-Farsi, dressed in traditional Emirati attire, smiling with pride. She was in the painting too, a little girl in a white dress standing between them, her hand resting on her father's arm. The painting had always made her feel safe. Until last month, that was when she'd noticed it.
The boy.
He stood just barely visible in the background of the portrait, behind a pillar. His features were blurred, as if the artist had hesitated to paint him clearly. Aaliyah had stared at the portrait for hours after that discovery.
Who was he?
Why had she never seen him before? When she asked her mother about it, Mariam laughed softly and dismissed it.
Just a trick of the paint, she said.
Nothing important. But it was important. Aaliyah could feel it in her bones. Ever since then, memories she had once buried began to resurface. Faint images of another child playing beside her in the garden, a soft voice whispering to her in the dark, a name that danced at the edge of her memory but refused to be spoken. That evening, as she walked down the grand staircase, she overheard something strange. Her father was in the study, speaking in low tones to someone on the phone. "He knows too much already," he said. "We have to keep Aaliyah from finding out the rest." Her heart skipped a beat. Who was he? And what was it that she was not supposed to find out? Aaliyah returned to her room and locked the door. For the first time in her life, she began to wonder if everything she believed about her family was a lie. And she was going to find out the truth, no matter what it cost her. The next morning, Aaliyah woke up with a sense of urgency pressing on her chest. The echo of her father's voice from the night before kept repeating in her mind. "We have to keep Aaliyah from finding out the rest." She dressed quickly and crept downstairs, trying not to draw attention. Her parents had left for an early charity event at the Dubai Opera House, and the house was unusually quiet. It was the perfect time to start searching for answers. She headed to the East Wing, the oldest part of the villa. There was one room she had never been allowed to enter. A dark wooden door with an ornate brass handle. Whenever she asked about it as a child, her mother would gently redirect her attention elsewhere. It was only used for storage, she had said. But Aaliyah had always felt that was a lie. Today, she would find out. She tried the handle.
Locked.
Of course. She went back to her father's office. The key drawer. Every other drawer was neatly labeled, but that one remained unmarked. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside lay a dozen small keys, each tagged with faded paper labels. She sorted through them until she found one marked simply, East. Her heartbeat quickened. Back at the door, she inserted the key and turned it slowly.
Click.
The door creaked open. A musty smell drifted out, thick with dust and old wood. She stepped inside. The room was dim, the only light coming from a narrow stained glass window. It was filled with boxes, old trunks, and shelves lined with photo albums and files. Everything looked untouched for years. Aaliyah's eyes scanned the room until they landed on a faded cardboard box marked Ziad. She froze. The name tickled something in her memory again.
Ziad.
That whisper in the dark. That shadow in the garden. She opened the box. Inside were children's drawings, school certificates, and a worn teddy bear. There were photos too. A boy about her age, with soft eyes and a shy smile, often standing beside her. In some photos, he had his arm around her shoulder. She didn't remember any of them, yet she was in every picture. Suddenly, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Panic surged through her. She quickly closed the box and stepped away from it. Her mother's voice rang out from behind the door. "Aaliyah? What are you doing in there?" Aaliyah struggled to breathe. She had crossed a line, and now there was no turning back. Aaliyah turned slowly towards the door, her heart pounding so loudly she thought her mother might hear it through the walls. She took a deep breath and opened the door just a crack. "I was just looking for some old photo albums," she said, forcing a smile. Her mother, Layla, stood tall and composed, dressed in an elegant abaya with delicate embroidery. But her eyes were sharp, scanning the room behind Aaliyah with restrained panic. "You should not be in here," she said, her voice calm but firm. "This part of the house is not safe. There is mold in the walls. It is not good for your lungs." Aaliyah nodded slowly, not daring to argue. She stepped out and closed the door behind her, slipping the key into her pocket. Layla didn't speak again. She simply turned and walked away, heels clicking rhythmically against the marble floor. Aaliyah followed her, feeling as though her movements were being watched, every step measured. That evening, Aaliyah went to the beach alone. The warm breeze from the Arabian Gulf was soothing, but her thoughts were tangled. She could not shake the image of the boy in the photographs. His presence stirred something deep inside her, a familiarity that bordered on sorrow. She reached for her phone and zoomed into one of the photos she had secretly taken from the box. There was a name written on the back: Ziad al-Sharif, born March 6, 2007. Her fingers trembled as she read it over and over. Al-Sharif. Her own surname. He was family. But why had no one ever mentioned him? Back at the villa, she decided to go straight to the one person who never lied to her, her grandfather, Hakim. He lived in a separate guest house at the back of the property, surrounded by palm trees and jasmine vines. She found him seated on his veranda, sipping tea and watching the sunset. "Ajido," she said softly, using the affectionate Arabic word for grandfather. "Can I ask you something?" He looked at her over the rim of his teacup, his eyes kind but cautious. "Always, Habibti." She sat beside him, showing him the photo of Ziad. His hands stilled. His face, usually warm and expressive, became unreadable. "Do you know who he is?" she asked gently. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he sighed. "I had hoped this day would not come," he said quietly. "There are secrets in this family that were buried for a reason, Aaliyah. To protect you." Her voice trembled. "But why does he have our name? Why do I not remember him?" He looked at her with sadness in his eyes. "Because, ya binti, you were made to forget." Aaliyah could barely sleep that night. Her grandfather's words circled in her mind like restless birds, refusing to settle. She kept staring at the photo of Ziad, as though his eyes might suddenly blink and offer answers. But the boy remained frozen in time, locked in an expression that seemed both hopeful and distant. At breakfast the next morning, she sat at the long dining table with her parents, Layla and Omar. The room was silent except for the clinking of cutlery. No one brought up the locked room, the photo, or the night before. It was as if it had never happened. Aaliyah cleared her throat. "Mama? Baba, did I have a brother?" The fork paused halfway to her father's mouth. Her mother's gaze stayed fixed on her tea. "No," Omar said shortly. "You are our only child. But what about Ziad al-Sharif?" Her mother's hand trembled slightly as she set down her cup. "Where did you hear that name?" she asked. "I found an old photo," Aaliyah replied. "In the storage room." Layla stood abruptly. "There is nothing more to say about this." "But there is," Aaliyah pressed. "I know I was made to forget him." "Why?" Her father looked angry now, but it was the kind of anger that came from fear. "You do not understand what you are asking." "Then help me understand." Layla's voice cracked. "Because he disappeared, Aaliyah. He vanished one night without a trace. And we never found him again." The room fell into a suffocating silence. "People started to talk," Layla continued. "They said it was a curse, that there was something wrong in our bloodline. So we did what we thought was best. We erased his memory to protect you from fear, from blame, from shame." Aaliyah's voice was a whisper. "But you can't erase someone's existence." Omar stood, his expression hard. "Some memories are too dangerous to keep alive." That day, Aaliyah wandered the city alone. The towering glass structures of Dubai shimmered under the sun, mirroring her fractured reflection in every window she passed. Everyone seemed to be moving, but she felt still, like a painting hung in the wrong frame. She ended up at the old souk in Dara, where smells of spices and echoes of old stories filled the air. An elderly vendor noticed the troubled look on her face. "You look like you are searching for something," he said kindly. "Maybe I am," she answered, unsure herself. He studied her quietly for a moment, then asked, "What is the name you are searching for?" "Ziad al-Sharif." The vendor blinked slowly. "That name has not been spoken in many years." Her breath caught. "You know it." He nodded. "A boy with that name used to visit this souk. Always alone. Always quiet. One day, he just stopped coming." Aaliyah's pulse quickened. "Do you know where he lived?" The vendor shook his head.
No.
"But I remember his eyes. They were like yours." The next few days felt like walking through a dream. Aaliyah found herself drawn more and more to places that once meant nothing to her. Corners of the city she used to pass without a second glance now seemed to whisper forgotten truths. The souk vendor's words haunted her. "His eyes were like yours." It clung to her thoughts like smoke she could not wave away. She returned to the souk each day, hoping for more fragments, more memories. But the vendor only shook his head. "That's all I remember," he kept saying. Back at home, the air had shifted. Her parents barely spoke to her. Her grandfather, when she asked him again, only repeated, "Some stories are buried for a reason." One morning, while scrolling through old news articles in the university library, Aaliyah came across a brief, forgotten piece from 16 years ago. "Boy goes missing after trip to Al-Marmum Desert." Name: Ziad al-Sharif.
Age: 8.
She gasped aloud. The article was vague. A camping trip. No witnesses. No body. Just a family torn apart by silence. She printed it and stared at the headline for hours. Al-Marmum. That night, she could not stop thinking about the desert. There was something there. She felt it. The following weekend, without telling anyone, she booked a driver to take her to the edge of Al-Marmum Conservation Reserve. The sky stretched endlessly above her as sand met sky in every direction. The dunes rolled like waves, and the silence was deafening. She wandered further into the reserve, camera in hand, hoping to find anything, an old sign, a memory, a trace. After an hour of walking, she saw something, a figure, far off, standing still among the dunes. She hesitated, then moved closer. It was a man, tall, cloaked in white, his face partly shielded by a keffiyeh. He did not move as she approached, and somehow, he did not seem surprised to see her. "Are you lost?" he asked gently. "I don't think so," she replied. "Are you from around here?" He smiled faintly. "I've been here a long time." Something about his eyes made her stop. They were dark and intense, filled with a sadness that seemed ancient. "Do you know the name Ziad al-Sharif?" she asked. He blinked slowly. "Why are you asking?" "He was my brother," she said. "He disappeared here 16 years ago." A long silence passed. The man looked out over the dunes, then back at her. "Perhaps some things are not meant to be found," he said softly. "Not yet." Then he walked away. Aaliyah stood there, rooted to the sand, her heart pounding in her chest. That voice, those eyes. There was something achingly familiar about them. She took a step forward, but he was already fading into the endless golden sea. Aaliyah could not sleep that night. The man's words replayed in her head on a loop. The way he spoke, the sadness in his eyes, it all clawed at something deep within her. Who was he? Why did it feel like she had met him before? The next morning, she returned to Al-Marmum alone. This time, she brought an old photograph with her, one of Ziad, taken just weeks before he vanished. She held the photo in her hand as she walked the same path again. The sun was sharp overhead, and the heat rose in shimmering waves from the sand. She walked for hours, but there was no sign of the man. Just sand, wind, and silence. At sunset, she sat on the highest dune, clutching the photo. She whispered her brother's name like a prayer into the desert wind. Then she saw it. A small wooden box, half buried in the sand nearby. Its lid cracked with age, the hinges rusted. With trembling hands, she pulled it out. Inside, there were old beads strung on a leather cord, a small wooden camel, a piece of paper, yellowed and fragile. She opened it carefully. In uneven, childlike handwriting, it read, "My name is Ziad. I am lost. I want to go home." Aaliyah choked back a cry. Her hands shook. She pressed the note to her chest. She took the box and ran back to the edge of the desert, as if afraid it would vanish if she waited too long. That evening, she showed the box to her grandfather. His eyes widened the moment he saw it. He reached for it with hands that trembled. He turned away and sat down heavily, not saying a word. "Did you know he was still alive?" she asked, barely whispering. Her grandfather looked at her with eyes rimmed in sorrow. "We all thought he was gone. But there was one man who never gave up looking."
Who?
"Your father." Aaliyah froze. Her father, the man who never spoke of Ziad, who always avoided questions, who kept the past sealed tight. "He searched for years," said her grandfather, "until your mother begged him to stop. He never did." That night, Aaliyah stood outside her parents' door. She knocked once. Her father opened it. For a moment, he looked at her like she was a stranger. Then he saw what she held. His face collapsed. "Where did you find that?" he asked, voice cracking. "In the desert," she replied. "I met someone. I think he knows something." Her father sank to the floor, his head in his hands. "I tried," he whispered. "I searched everywhere. But the trail went cold." "Do you believe he's alive?" she asked. "I always have," he said. The next day, Aaliyah returned once more to Al-Marmum, this time with her father by her side. He had not stepped into the desert in over 15 years. Now, every step he took seemed to carry the weight of 100 memories. They said little as they walked, the silence between them speaking volumes. The dunes stretched endlessly, and the wind whispered secrets only the desert knew. By late afternoon, they reached the place where Aaliyah had first seen the man. Her father stopped, eyes scanning the horizon, as though expecting a ghost to appear. Then, in the distance, they saw him. He was standing just as before, alone, still, a figure shaped by sand and sun. As they approached, Aaliyah could see the man's expression change. His eyes locked onto her father, and something flickered across his face. Recognition.
Fear. Hope.
Her father froze. "Ziad," he said, voice barely audible. The man stepped back. Aaliyah held up the photo, the old box still in her bag. "We found your things," she said gently. "We've never stopped looking." The man's eyes filled with tears. I didn't think anyone would come." Her father stepped forward, slowly, tears streaming down his face. "I looked for you," he whispered. "I never stopped." The man's shoulders shook. He covered his face with his hands and sank to his knees in the sand. Aaliyah stood still, her heart pounding. This was it. The moment every question turned into truth. The man looked up. "I don't remember everything," he said. "I remember voices. Screaming. Then darkness. I woke up somewhere strange. Someone took me in. They said I was their son. I didn't know who I really was." Her father knelt beside him. "You were taken," he said. "We feared the worst." "I kept dreaming about a girl," the man said, "with a red ribbon in her hair. She called me Zizi." Aaliyah gasped. That had been her name for him. No one else knew. Her father reached out, touching the man's shoulder. "You are Ziad," he said. "My son." Her brother. The man stared at them both, breathing heavily. Then, as if something within him snapped into place, he whispered, "I remember." The reunion stirred a torrent of emotions. Aaliyah watched as her father and brother shared stories tangled in silence and regret. Ziad struggled to recall the years lost. His memories were fragments, faces, places, feelings that refused to form a clear picture. Together, they began piecing it all together. The man who took Ziad was a distant relative, a troubled man who believed Ziad was his own child. He had taken him far from home, keeping him hidden from the family. Ziad had grown up under a different name, in a different world, unaware of his true identity. Aaliyah felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. The brother she had long mourned was alive, but so much time was gone forever. Her parents confessed the pain of holding on to hope while pretending to accept loss. They promised to rebuild what was broken, to heal old wounds with patience and love. But there was one question that lingered in the desert air. Why had Ziad never come back sooner? The question hung heavily between them as the sun dipped below the horizon. Ziad's silence was uneasy. He confessed that fear had chained him to his new life. The man who raised him had warned him to never seek his real family. The past was dangerous, he was told. Every time Ziad thought of leaving, the threat of losing everything he had held him back. Now, reunited, the wounds of betrayal and lost years seemed deeper than the desert's vastness. Aaliyah reached out, her voice steady. "We will face it all, together." Her father nodded. There is no shame in being lost, only in never trying to find your way back. Ziad looked at his family, hope flickering for the first time in years. The night wrapped around them, the desert stars bearing silent witness to a family's fragile new beginning. Morning light spilled over the dunes, casting long shadows behind them as Aaliyah, Ziad, and their father prepared to leave the desert. The journey home was not just a return to the city, but a step towards healing. There were still many questions unanswered, many scars that would take time to heal. Yet, hope was a seed planted in the arid soil of their hearts. Ziad promised to learn about the family he lost and to rebuild the bonds time had tried to sever. Aaliyah felt a quiet strength settle within her. The truth she had sought for so long was finally unfolding, and with it, the chance for a future where the past no longer held them captive. As they drove away from the desert, the sun rose higher, illuminating a new path ahead. Together, they faced the unknown, not as strangers, but as family reunited.